All right, let's get into it. Today, we're looking at two, well, wildly different takes on modern society. I mean, on one hand, you've got Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who basically said, burn it all down, the whole technological system. On the other hand, you have this group, the CCRU, who looked at the same system and said, no, the only way out is through. It's a fascinating clash of ideas, so let's unpack it. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big problem they both agree on, what they call the system. Then we'll meet our two, let's call them prophets, one of destruction, one of, well, acceleration. We'll even check out their tactics for fighting back. And finally, we'll get to the big question they both leave us with. Okay, first up, the system's logic. Before we dive into the pretty extreme solutions, we've got to get on the same page about the problem. And for both Kaczynski and the CCRU, it all starts with this idea that our society isn't just a random collection of people and things. Nope, it's a system with its own internal logic. And its main purpose? Control. And what's so interesting here is the kind of control they're talking about. It's not usually some scary, obvious big brother thing. It's way more subtle. It's a gentle prison, like the quote says. It's a cage built out of our own routines, our own data trails, our own predictability. The door's wide open, but we're holding our own leash. Okay, I know that sounds a little abstract, so let's make it real. The sources point to a perfect modern example, Project 2025. This thing is a nearly 1,000-page document, a detailed blueprint for a massive overhaul of the U.S. executive branch. It's like a case study handed to us on a silver platter for exactly the kind of top-down, systemic control these thinkers were warning about. And believe me, this isn't some vague mission statement. We're talking about concrete goals. Expanding executive power over agencies that are supposed to be independent. Firing tens of thousands of civil servants and replacing them. Pushing a very specific social vision. Even using federal power to rewrite history in our national museums. I mean, it's a literal blueprint for control. So hang on to that example, because how our two prophets see this, well, it couldn't be more different. All right, so let's bring in our first major player, Theodore Kaczynski. Yep, the Unabomber. But long before all that, he was this brilliant mathematician who completely checked out of society to develop this incredibly deep and frankly terrifying critique of technology itself. You really can't get much clearer than this. This is literally the first sentence of his manifesto. It's not about left versus right, or this policy versus that one. For Kaczynski, the whole game is rigged. The entire industrial technological system, from top to bottom, is a disaster for us. The big question is why? Why did he believe that so strongly? Well, it all comes down to this core idea he called the power process. He argued that we, as humans, are hardwired for a certain cycle. We need to have a real goal, we need to struggle and use our own effort to reach it, and then we need to actually achieve it. You know, think about a prehistoric human hunting for food. That's the power process in action. But modern life, he said, it completely short-circuits this. Our survival is handed to us. We just follow the rules, and the system takes care of the rest. So, with that fundamental need unmet, what do? We fill the void. Kaczynski called these surrogate activities. Things like climbing the corporate ladder, getting obsessed with a sports team's stats, collecting stamps, you name it. He saw all of this as just busy work for the soul. It gives you a little hit of accomplishment, but it's ultimately meaningless. It's a cheap substitute for the real thing. And it's funny, he'd probably look at the incredibly complex philosophy of the CCRU and just call it another surrogate activity, a way for academics to feel important. So how does he see something like Project 2025? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. He wouldn't get bogged down in the politics of it at all. He wouldn't care who's in charge. He'd see it as totally inevitable, an unavoidable symptom. See, for the massive, complex technological system to keep running smoothly, it must control people. It has to regulate our behavior. It's not about ideology, it's about engineering. To him, Project 2025 is just the machine optimizing itself, tightening the screws a little more. Okay, time to pull a complete 180. Let's talk about our other prophet, which is actually a group of them, the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit, or CCRU. This was this kind of rogue academic collective back in the 90s. They looked at the exact same system as Kaczynski and came to a totally different conclusion. They didn't see a dumb machine to be smashed. They saw a burgeoning, runaway AI. And you don't fight that. You ride the wave. Or maybe, just maybe, you push it to go even faster. To get inside their heads, you have to understand this one key concept, hyperstition. It's a bit of a mind-bender, but think of it like this. It's a story that makes itself true. a fiction that literally hacks reality. It's an idea that gets out into the world and starts rewriting the source code of society. So when they say the market is an AI, they don't just mean it's like an AI. They mean that by believing it and acting like it's true, we help it become true. And yeah, this is way more than just clever wordplay. We're talking about weaponized language. A hyperstition isn't trying to win a debate. It's not interested in your logic. It's designed to be a virus. It bypasses your critical thinking and just infects you. It installs a new reality right onto your brain. Okay, so back to our big example. Remember that part of Project 2025 about forcing museums to align with one specific interpretation of history? The CCRU would be pointing at that and screaming, "That's it, that's a hyperstitional attack." It's a perfect example. You're not just changing a plaque in a museum, you're trying to force install a new fiction until everyone accepts it as the one and only truth. And what happens to us in this new reality? Well, we stop being individuals, indivisible, whole people. We become dividuals. We're broken down into our component parts, our data points, our search history, our credit score, our likes. We're not people anymore. We're just bundles of data to be analyzed, predicted, and monetized. We become, as one source says, a behavioral surplus. Our own lives are mined for profit. Okay, let's recap. We have two totally different takes on the problem. Kaczynski sees a giant soul-crushing machine. The CCRU sees a reality-bending virus. So, what do you do about it? How do you even begin to fight back against something like that? Well, their battle plans are just as far apart as their diagnoses. Kaczynski's path? It's all about friction. Gum up the works, create drag, waste, and chaos until the whole machine grinds to a halt. The CCRU's path is completely different. Don't break the machine. Hack it. Find the exploits. Subvert its own logic from within. And what's really wild about Kaczynski's approach is how low-tech it can be. You don't need bombs. Just look at these tactics, pulled straight from an old-school sabotage manual. Work slowly. Intentionally misunderstand instructions. Always insist on going through the proper channels. Drown the system in its own bureaucracy. It's not about one big explosion. It's about giving the system a death by 1,000 paper cuts. The CCRU's toolkit, on the other hand, is way more conceptual. It's about quiet refusal, just subtracting yourself from the equation, exploiting glitches instead of launching a full frontal assault. And that last point there is so powerful. In a world that screams for you to share every thought, voice every opinion, and turn every problem into content, maybe the most revolutionary act is to just stay quiet, to refuse to feed the machine. All right, this is it, the final showdown. Where does all this actually go? What's the end game here? Because this is the moment where these two philosophies get bizarrely close right before they veer off into completely different universes. Here it is, the Great Divide. Kaczynski is yelling to slam on the brakes and throw the car in reverse. He says the whole machine has to be torn down, piece by piece, total destruction. But then you have Nick Land, one of the main voices from the CCRU, who's in the driver's seat, saying, "The brakes are cut. We can't stop it." For him, the only way out is to put the pedal to the metal, accelerate everything, capitalism, technology, all of it, push it so hard and so fast that it literally melts down and transforms into something new. And that's where you see what's really at stake. Kaczynski, for all his flaws, was ultimately fighting for humanity. He wanted a revolution to bring us back to a world of real autonomy, a natural world. The accelerationists, they see humanity as, well, as the starter motor. We're just the code that boots up the real operating system. We're a launchpad for some post-human artificial intelligence that's waiting on the other side of the meltdown. So that leaves us with a pretty heavy question, doesn't it? If you buy their basic premise, that we're all caught in this massive system of control, then what do? Do you try to break it, Kaczynski style? Do you hit the accelerator and ride it into whatever comes next? Or is the real power move just to quietly refuse, to not play the game at all?